All right. So if people can let us know here on the YouTube side whether all the audio is sounding good, we just want to make sure that everything is looking good, sounding good here before we begin. I'm just gonna shut off Chrome real quick. Just give us a thumbs up if you're hearing everything well. It looks like everything's metering well on our side. Nothing too unusual. Everything's looking pretty good. But I just want to make sure that we have everything dialed audio-wise before we start and getting into it. Landon Jordan. What a bro.
Yo.
All right, audio is good. All right. Hey, Landon.
My guy.
We're going to do a little bit for you. Why don't we, before we start doing anything, let's just have Tim play. We're going to throw on the headphones when Tim's playing just so that we can hear, because I have a cabinet mic'd and he's going through that, and I can't have the monitors going in here. So let's hear it. Let's hear something, Tim.
That's my only Landon lick I know. Yes, sir.
All right.
So yeah,
Sick.
how does this work?
Yeah, so I mean that was just Nile, right, on that one? Oh, what's going on with that octave? Here, we got a question here just because it's pertinent to kind of what Tim was just playing. Landon's asking what was going on with that octave sound. Tell him kind of what's going on. We have kind of a small pedal board here that's Tim's. What are you doing there, Tim?
And he wrote that in all caps, so that's
and they can see.
we have to address that.
We have to address all caps.
All
right.
Yeah, this is something really cool that I've used for a while. It's just like this Boss OC3, and it's the only octave pedal that I know of that can like isolate certain frequencies. So you can just set it to an octave down for basically like your lower two strings. So you can do like a pseudo kind of Charlie Hunter-esque thing. So
the poor man's Charlie Hunter.
I'll turn it up a little bit. It's pretty cool. I use it a lot for like solo gigs.
Yeah.
Where I'm just kind of.
And if you're on Instagram and you want to hear it, go to the YouTube channel, the Vertex YouTube channel, so you're able to hear this completely.
Oh yeah, click the link so you can hear the guitar going through the system. Let me turn it up so it's kind of obvious.
You want to loop something with it and then you bring it in and out?
So yeah, it's hopefully you can hear that, but
Yeah, through here, everybody will hear it through the 57 with the mic'd cab. But if you're on Instagram, you're just going to hear this acoustically. So you need to go over to YouTube if you want to hear it professionally recorded, or at least as professionally as we can get on a live broadcast. It's going through my Apollo, and then we have a 412 in the under the house that's all soundproofed, and it's just got 457s on 4 different speakers. So right now we're going through a G1265, and we have a Fender Concert, just totally clean, just no pedals. All right. Let's take a few questions.
Okay, yeah.
All right, let's see. All right, so that was what was going on with the octave thing, right? So OC2, and you were kind of setting it to kind of trigger based on the bottom 2 strings. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah.
Poor man's Charlie Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go early on. Let's see. This is Chris in Utah. Play bass is a Sans amp and EQ. You know much about Sans amps? I think it's the same company as Tech 21, and I mean most of they have different. I think they have different models of it, but it does have an EQ, and I think it's just it's a DI with an EQ. So I think technically, yeah, it is an EQ. You could add something on top of that if you wanted, but not a requisite thing. If you're getting the tone you want out of it, don't bother with an EQ. Nico, hello from France. Hey, Stephan, Honduras, good to see you. Denmark, Marius, very cool. Thank you for tuning in. Daniel from Indiana, I was just there last week at Sweetwater. Very cool. And thanks, guys, for all of you who came in and just let us know that the audio was working. So thank you. Dialed in audio chef's perfect. All right, Smelly Telly, can't stick around long. Just want to say Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. Just almost there. Do anything special, Tim? You gonna be in town?
What am I doing? Oh, I'm just in the Bay Area.
The Bay Area. What about you, Whit?
Yeah, I'm just hanging out.
Okay, this is Tim's manager, Whit.
Hey.
Also known as Of. That's all that shows on the camera. All right.
That's my boy. Of.
Okay.
Shout
Riley
out.
Tech. Is this Tim from the Game of Tones videos?
Yeah.
Of course, it is.
Yeah.
The one and only Tim Marco.
Yes, sir.
He did, if you haven't checked out Game of Tones, that was an incredible series where Tim typically was our guy. He was replicating classic studio recordings where we would play the master track and then just remove the guitar, and then he would come in and re-record the guitar using one of our pedals, and then we would play them to a blind audience to see if they could tell the difference between the original and the fake. And we did that. We probably got away with it maybe 5 or 6 times, and then YouTube really started cracking down on that stuff. So we kind of had to pivot away from it. But some of them are still up, so I highly recommend that you check those out if you haven't checked them out already. They're really fun, and it's cool to see if you can tell the difference, because a lot of people in the comments, especially until we made it known what the actual results were, it was pretty split on most of these. So that's cool. All right, Aaron, can you recommend the Quilter Tone Block 202 for direct recording? Can you recommend it? You actually have a Quilter. We're not using it right now, but this pedalboard does have a Quilter.
Is that the tone block? The small one?
No, that's not.
It's different.
It's different. It's more like the other one that I had loaned you. That was kind of the one that preceded the 202.
I have the small one, the 50 watt, the green, the one that they just came out with. I've recorded. Yeah, you can record with it. It sounds really good. It has 2 settings, which is nice. It has a vintage setting and then a modern setting, which is like more full fidelity. The vintage setting has like less bass and more of like a upper mid-range bump or whatever. They both sound good. I actually use that a lot for solo gigs. Again, I actually just run it into a PA and it sounds really, really, really good.
And you're using cab simulation in the.
Yeah, I guess that has cab simulation.
Because you're going balanced out on it. Okay.
Yeah. And then you can also run it with a cab, and it's 50 watts, so it's just enough wattage to keep up with a drummer that's not super loud. but it gets pretty loud.
Cool. Yeah, and I've always thought that quilters were great. We did this thing called tone tasting that Tim was also the player for, and we used a Quilter 101 reverb, which is kind of, again, the predecessor to that smaller. I think the 101's maybe 50 watts or something like that. And we used that in combination with our pedals and got a lot of really, really good tones. So I've always been really satisfied with everything that Quilter has put out. This is from Jonathan Holt. He says, loves the subtle octave.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to give a reminder to all the folks that are on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, please follow us over on YouTube. That'll give you the best sound so that you're able to actually hear what's going on and have a little bit more interactive experience. So go and check that out if you haven't already. Dr. Marcio Onita, he said the Just Room mic on Instagram. That's correct. So we're only able to do the full broadcast with all the audio and all the fancy stuff on YouTube. We can't do it the same way on Instagram. So that's why we are encouraging people to make the journey over. Riolio9, what's up from Austin, Texas? Great city. Zapata's from there. He was just on last week. This is again from the doctor. This is us speaking doctor to doctor as the rig doctor. I don't know what you're a doctor of, Marcio, but let us know. Just bought the steel string pedal. Should I use it after the TS9 and KLON as an always-on pedal, right? How do you use it, Tim, when you've used the steel string on different stuff? What do you think? Are you more of like a before the drive kind of guy or an after the drive kind of guy when it comes to steel string?
I think after usually is how I'm using it. I use it after the Ultraphonics. I don't have it on this board, but on a different board. That's usually the way I use it.
Mm. And I'm in agreement with that. I think that the best way to treat it is kind of like an amplifier, kind of like power amp. And even though it is kind of more of a preamp style pedal, but I think that it really imparts a sound to everything that goes into it and kind of makes it more of that Dumble clean tone. Even when you're using a dirty Dumble pedal into it, it still kind of is more of that vibe. Like, I don't think it takes away. I think it really adds in that case. And if you think about it, if you're treating the steel string like an amp and you're thinking of all the guys that use tube screamers and KLONs and stuff like that, whether it's John Mayer, whether it's SRV, they would always have those pedals going into the amp. They wouldn't be using the pedals like after the amp, like in an effects loop or something like that. They'd be using it going into the amp. So you would want to kind of treat it that way, like tube screamer, KLON, steel string, amplifier. So I would say treat it that way.
I would say it sounds really great with a KLON. There's something about the upper mid-rangey KLON stuff with the steel string just kind of adds like bottom end to it. Sounds really good.
Cool. All right. And if you're on Instagram and you're wondering where we're getting these questions from, these are all happening over on YouTube. So I encourage you, for the fullest experience, to migrate over to YouTube. Lannon says, you sold me on it. I'm assuming he's talking about the Octave. You sound fantastic, man. Can't wait to see you next month. He's talking about NAMM. If you're not sure, have a good one, guys. Thanks, Landon, for tuning in. We'll have to get you on one of the live streams here. Landon Jordan is an incredible player. If you guys aren't aware of who he is, really, really, really good. Stephan, running pedals on the front or using an effects loop. We're not using any effects loop here. This is all in front.
Yeah,
Just going straight into a Fender concert, a Rivera era concert. So, what's that, 60 watts? 60 watts, something like that? I think it's 60 watts. But all clean. Not on the drive channel. But there is a drive channel here that's actually pretty good. Why don't we break from questions for a second? Why don't you play? Let's hear the lead tone. Let's hear some with the lead tone, maybe like a loop thing using the tone secret.
Yeah. Okay.
We use the little tone secret here. We're gonna do a little looping. You can kind of hear that sounds. Tim's a big tone secret user.
No, not doing that. Let's see. Let me set up a new one.
Set up a new loop.
Yeah. That's pretty reverb. This is the tone secret, kind of rolled off a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounded great. So that was actually a combination of a couple of things. So it was like the signal path on those tones.
So this the whole sound I'm getting, whether it's clean or dirty, it's I'm using the Nile compressor, the Vertex Nile compressor, and then for that lead tone I'm using the Tone Secret, and I have it set perfectly. It took me a second to get it dialed in, but I really found an awesome sound out of it that I've been just using a lot live, and it's just great. It's super versatile. And then there's also the octave pedal on there as well. That's just kind of the fatness you're hearing.
Yeah, Sean Tubbs had asked here, okay, what's the deal with the octave thingy? That sounds cool, or that sounds cool. Great playing, Tim. Sean Tubbs is...
What's up, Sean? Thanks, dude.
Best of the best right there.
That's the dude.
Yeah. So we've talked about it a little bit before, but probably Sean is just coming into this, so tell him what that is.
It's just the Boss OC3, and it's on the poly mode, so it's just, you can isolate what frequencies it's affecting, and so you just set it to only affect kind of these two strings. And I really like it for the kind of almost like Parliament funkadelic, like if you're playing some riffs with some dirt, like you can really get some cool effect, but it doesn't affect these top strings, so you can still solo in it and all that stuff. So it just kind of extends the range of your instrument, kind of thing.
Cool. Let's jump back up. There's a lot of questions that I kind of skimmed over. I promise that we'll come back. And if you're one of the few people that are left on Instagram, we're really doing the more interactive version of this on YouTube. So if you can, join us over there on the Vertex Effects channel, and you'll see us broadcasting live. This is all getting everything recorded through an Apollo, so it all sounds about as good as it can sound, all through a mic'd Fender Concert with a G1265 and an SM57.
Yeah, shout out to Eddie, because he's streaming on Instagram and on YouTube at the same time. That's a real bro.
That's a committed bro.
That's a real bro.
All right. This is Mr. Prez 17. Maybe he's another guy running for president. What kind of guitar are you playing there?
So, dude, this is a Jeff Beck Strat, just the standard one. So it's kind of like an American standard, but it's got like the contoured heel and the roller nut and all that stuff. And then I put Lawler Blackface pickups in it. Those are like my favorite Strat pickups.
Cool. Let's see. Jonathan Holt, just curious, but why do you prefer building on flat boards as opposed to elevated boards like the Blackbird or Temple Audio boards? Well, there's a few reasons. Firstly is that you can change the size and make it whatever size you want. So in other words, you're not going to be set to whatever the standard sizes are that manufacturer determines as being the sizing of the rig. If you want to have a deeper rig and not as wide rig, you can accommodate that very easily. If you want a narrower, less deep rig that's kind of wide, you can do that as well. And you're not really contained by anything that's determined by the manufacturer. But that's sort of I think more of a fringe reason. The primary reason is that on a lot of those boards where you need to mount pedals underneath, power supplies underneath, you're at risk of noise in a lot of cases, because a lot of the non-switching power supplies that most people use, the linear power supplies that have transformers and things like that, they will emanate a hum because there's a magnetic field that's circling the entire pedal board their whole time, and there's different directions with which that happens. And some guys claim to use toroids in their power supplies. Most are not really true toroids; they're kind of more like semi-toroid. And if you route certain cables in a different, and you don't circumvent where the loop area is, or the magnetic field of the transformer, then you can really risk adding a lot of noise to your system. And if you even put certain digital pedals on top of a power supply, it can cause a hum in your rig. And you can actually physically hear it if you take your pedal and it's plugged in and you move it over the power supply. You can actually hear where you might be picking up noise. And so it sort of restricts you from where you put things. Certain pedals with clocks in them, if you put them on top of the power supply, you can hear the clocking of that pedal through the actual amplifier because the power supply is creating some sort of interference with the clock inside the pedal. So these would be things like choruses, flangers, phasers, things that have clocks in them, tremolos, or variable rates. And you can hear that rate like a little pulse through the entire amplifier. And the other thing is that when you're wiring stuff that's like on both sides, like top side, bottom side, it's really difficult to troubleshoot. And if you're feeding it in through holes and stuff like that, then you have to figure out exactly where you put stuff. And it can really be a nightmare to troubleshoot that. And this is why you see 99.9% of the professionals that are doing this for a career, whether that's a Robert Bradshaw, a Dave Friedman, Exact Tone in Nashville, Brian O'Million, these guys overwhelmingly use flat pedal boards because it is sort of the tried and true method that is easiest to tech, that's easiest to troubleshoot on the fly, and having everything top mounted doesn't have require you to go up and down to figure out what's what, and everything's protected. You don't have to worry about something taking a hit from underneath the pedal board, perhaps maybe collapsing some of your cables or cutting some of your cables or creating friction against it. So it's typically not the way that the pro rigs are done, and that's pretty much been the standard since 1980. And the materials that people use for flatboards has changed over time. We use a really lightweight composite that we get from Get Off My Case, UMC, and they're linked in the description below. And the other thing I would say lastly is sometimes grounding on some of those metal boards can be problematic, and you need to make sure that you've actually grounded your stuff to it properly, because you can risk having some RF attracted to the pedal board by way of it being metal. It's almost kind of like an antenna at that point if you don't treat it properly. So there's little tricks to do that, and it's not like that's a deal breaker. It's certainly something you can work around, and some people may not even have that problem, especially if they're using clean amps where it's not going to reveal a lot of the inherent issues in the pedal board. If you're trying to throw a high gain amp, though, that it might reveal things that you ordinarily wouldn't hear. So just some things to watch out for, and the reason why we only use flat pedal boards on our stuff.
What's up, dude?
You got some folks.
Come over.
Come over to YouTube if you're one of the people that's on
Milo,
Instagram.
Come over here.
Come over to YouTube.
You know where this is.
Come over to YouTube. All right. Any thoughts on the Fractal Audio FM3? I don't know what that is. What is an FM3?
I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
I've never used any of the Fractal stuff.
I don't know what it is.
Not saying that you shouldn't. I just have not.
Who is Fractal? Never heard of her. All right, Matt, why is my overdrive button always quieter when I'm running pedals in my Blackstar amp? The volumes are relatively the same when I switch between the clean and overdrive, no pedals engaged. So why is my overdrive button always quieter when I'm running pedals in my Blackstar amp? The volumes are relatively the same when I switch between the clean and the overdrive. Well, I don't know. I guess if you have shared volume controls of everything, are all the EQs and all the volume shared? Because if you have different volumes and different EQs, it could be that your EQ on your overdrive channel maybe has less mids, and so the perception is that maybe it's lower in volume when actually, like, if you were to look at it, it's about the same.
Maybe you have a bad cable.
I'm still kind of not 100% understanding what I'm thinking he's saying. You tell me what you think he's saying. I think he's saying is that he's changing channels between his amp, and when he goes to his overdrive channel with pedals, it sounds quieter than when he's got his clean channel with pedals. That may not be what he's saying. What do you think he's saying? What do you think he's saying?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could be a matter of, like, saturation. Sometimes when amps get saturated, if he's using, like, a lot of overdrive or something, right, it kind of appears, it rounds off so much that it appears not to cut as much.
Right. Well, it also sort of the same thing of when you put a boost before an overdrive pedal is similarly to like using an overdrive pedal into a dirty amp, because it's not going to necessarily add as much volume as it's going to add more saturation. Right? Like if you just wanted to get more volume out of it, you would actually need to put like a boost or something like that in the effects loop, so that it was boosting into the power amp and not saturating the preamp section more.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be part of what it is that he's experiencing, if I'm understanding this question properly. So let us know, Matt, and we can come back to that. Let's see. Marius, we kind of just talked about this flat versus angle pedal boards. It really comes down to troubleshooting. And the ankle stuff tends to be really heavy comparatively. Having flat pedal boards where you can stagger everything customized, especially now with guys like Fixed Pedal Boards offering the tier risers and stuff like that. There's really nothing that you can't customize on a flat pedal board and kind of make it whatever way you want and kind of have the best of both worlds, where you have kind of elevated platforms for each like row of pedals. And now they're even doing the hinged pedal board. So if you've seen the most recent post that we've done, you can see they even have hinged risers, so they bend all the way back to about 72 degrees, which is a pretty cool thing. So just reference what I talked about earlier. If you were on here, you probably heard that already. Dan of New Jersey, hey guys, hey Dan, thanks for chiming in. Mario Fuentes, thoughts on the J Rocket Melody Drive? Have you tried this pedal? I think it's the Mark Lettieri one.
Oh, looks really cool.
Looks cool. I haven't played it.
Mark Lettieri is incredible.
He's a great player. If he likes it, I'm sure it's good. You're welcome, Doctor. Michael Perez, hey, thanks for chiming in. Thanks, Dave. Tim's does sound great. Okay, we're kind of catching up now. All right. Opinion on Rev pedals. This is from Stephan Cano. Have you played any of the Rev stuff?
Mm-mm.
I know one of my buddies, Anthony Best, really likes their stuff. I didn't really get a chance to play any of it, but I've heard Sean Tubbs demo it, and it always sounded really good. I haven't tried any, though, personally, to be able to put an opinion there. Eddie... He's a great player.
Eddie's my guy.
Eddie's an incredible player. If you guys don't know Uncle Eddie here, go check him out. All right, here's a technical question. Then let's do some playing after this. I run my effects loop through my dirty amp effects loop. Is there an efficient way to connect all of my pedals in series, including my effects loop, without having to contact and disconnect cables in a sort of pedal platform? I don't know if I understand this question totally, Michael. I mean, if you don't want to disconnect stuff and you want to use the effects loop, then you're going to have some sort of patch bay that routes the pedals in the effects loop to the effects loop. And you probably are going to want to have some buffering going on, at least on the send to the amp, send or the input of the amplifier, and then the return going back to the amplifier from the effects loop, because that capacitance is it can be pretty heavy, because those are going to be longer cable runs comparatively to anything on the pedal board. Ideally, also an input buffer, you want to make sure you have that on there, but that's going to be the best way to do it, I think. So, what do you got?
Crazy. I was just saying Whit should watch the live stream from his phone.
Oh, I don't think it'll look that good compared to this. You gonna watch it? You know what?
I don't know. What's he doing back there?
What is he doing back there?
I don't know.
What's Of doing? So basically the bottom line is, Michael, is there's one company that I know that makes one that works in an effects loop. It's the Empress Stereo Buffer, and there's a way that you can set that up so it works with an effects loop, and you can have all those buffers active that I just mentioned, an input buffer, an output buffer, and then another buffer on the return. So I would check that thing out, and you can kind of use that as your patch bay, and it also has a boost available on it as well, which is a pretty cool function. So I would check that out. Before we go to more questions, I think let's play a little something else, because Tim, you're such a great player. People should hear you play.
Let's see.
That sounded great, man. That sounded great.
Noodle City over here.
All right, let's go. We talked about the J-Rock. We talked to Sean Tubbs. All right, this is Dan of New Jersey. All right, if you have a fuzz, a compressor, and a boost, what's the best order? Well, if it's a germanium fuzz or something that's impedance sensitive, I'd say guitar, fuzz, compressor, boost, in the order that you wrote it.
Boom.
Any disagreement with that, Tim?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Don't argue with the doctor.
Hey, John from Houston. We got Aaron from Israel. How can I run stereo effects if I want to use the Quilter Tone Block 202 amp? Well, anything that you're running stereo, it's gonna require that you have 2 amps. So you'd have to either get another tone block or have another amplifier of some kind in order to make that stereo. Or if the effect is just stereo and you're just running into 1 amp, then usually they have a dedicated mono, which is typically the left. So you would just go in and out of the left output or the one that's designated as mono.
Fortune's on.
Let's go to David Jansen. I've heard octave pedals unlikely would have thought the put in a parallel lower mix that would work, to use one of those parallel loop things. Okay, you can buy it for a board. Yeah, it's like a parallel loop thing would be like the Exotic X blender. I think is the hippest parallel blender that I've seen. But I don't know. Suggestion to you, Tim.
That sounds pretty cool. I mean, ideally you would just have a mix knob on the octave pedal, but if it doesn't, then yeah. But that sounds cool. Like maybe for like a shimmery, like if you wanted like an octave up, for like a 12-string effect, if you could control like how much of it.
But he's talking about like using it in a parallel, so you would be blending essentially the clean tone in parallel with the octave affected tone.
Oh, like a wet dry thing.
Well, not really wet dry, but like there are a lot of these parallel loopers. Essentially, the clean signal goes in all the time, and then it loops in the pedal in a loop, and then you can blend how much of the clean sound is in parallel with the affected sound simultaneously. But it doesn't go through like separate amps or anything like that.
Oh.
I'll show you the thing when we're done.
I'm out of my depth.
The X blender.
Maybe.
Thoughts on buying used pedals?
Yeah, do it.
Why
no,
not?
I'm just kidding.
I think it just depends.
Except for Vertex pedals. New.
I think it just depends, if it's like a vintage pedal or something that's, obviously there's not even that option, or if it's like stuff where there's crazy wait lists. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you have the money and it's a little more expensive to buy it used, time, if you wanted to try it out now, then that could be a concern. But I mean, I think pedals now are pretty well built for the most part. It seems like straight across the board. So assuming that the person's got a good rating and that they took care of the pedal responsibly, I don't know that there's a whole lot of risk in doing that. And it also just depends on the degree to which you want to support the manufacturers. If you really like certain manufacturers, you want to support what they're doing. Buying it from them. Sometimes there's deals. Like in Christmas, we just had some deals going on through us and a lot of our retailers. We also have like B stock kind of like liquidations every once in a while for pedals that are damaged and things like that. So you can always look for those, and that's a good way to kind of get some on a discount, but still has the full warranty. So it's a consideration. If you're not concerned about the risks, then go for it. You might save a few bucks. David is apologizing for big fingers on a phone keyboard. Russellmania says poor man's Charlie Hunter, KMA Tyler would do that and more. I don't know what a KMA Tyler is. You know what a KMA Tyler is?
No, we're not.
Or is it a player?
Or is it a player? I worry about crowding the inductors of my crossover. It's in my head, but still. I don't know what this is referring to. I really like the comment popping up thing. Yeah, this is a cool software that we're using here from our friends over at Ecamm, and allow us to do this, have using all the pro mic stuff, all that, so that makes it a heck of a lot easier. Main thing is to stand. I don't know if he's referring back to when we were talking about finding noise with linear power supplies. I'm not really sure. Maybe Lynette can confirm what that is. WrestleMania Steel String is awesome. My to buy list is so long. Well, I think that there's still like a couple left on our B stock on our site, so you might be able to get a good deal on one there. Back to Eddie. This is probably a noob question, but what gives a compressor pedal that noise floor on your signal? And does the Nile have a reduced noise floor, or is it just inevitable with comps? So there's some that have a lesser noise floor than others. Some of it depends on design, and because so many compressors are like classic designs like Ross or Orange Squeezer or things like that, there's sort of an inherent noise in a lot of those because there's a whole like preamp that it's running through. It increases the noise floor. There's some gain that's being run through there. It also just depends on like when the compressor is grabbing, because if you notice on a lot of compressors, when the compressor starts to engage, it actually cuts a lot of that noise out. And there's different techniques on how people do that. Some people actually kind of reverse how the compressor grabs versus it not grabbing. So there's actually more noise when it's on, but you don't hear it because the signal's louder than the actual noise floor that it produces. The Nile's pretty dang quiet though, I would say, as far as like compressors are going. It's still kind of like, done like an 1176 style. It's got some modifications to it that kind of pull from some different classic compressors, just because I'm optimizing it for guitar, whereas an 1176 would be used across a lot of different instruments. So it wasn't really optimized for one in particular. But I don't know, do you find that the Nile's noisy?
No.
I think you can almost set it where it's unintelligible in a clean amp between it and the dry signal.
Yeah, I would say I really like it because it's so transparent, so you can really dial it in. It's like not, it's just very, transparent. It's I don't know how else to say it. Sounds great. Sounds amazing.
All right, so thank you, Eddie, for that. Gabby Bergman sending his best.
What's up, Gabby?
Stephan, fuzz before or after drives? Before or after wah? What do you think? Where do you like your fuzz? I think before drive seems like the logical place.
I don't know. I usually just text you when I have questions.
Before drives, as close to the guitar as possible. Wah. There's different thoughts. If you're using it with the fuzz, it's going to sound bad unless you have a buffer in the wah, what they call a fuzz-friendly wah. But I really think it compromises the tone on the wah and on the fuzz when you do that. So I think it actually, I prefer the wah after the fuzz, but that's me.
So what are you saying? You're saying you put it after?
I put it after because, people will put in those buffers in their wahs because the sweep is affected because of the impedance, the high impedance of the fuzzes. And so they put a buffer in the output of the wah, so it's feeding the fuzz with a lower impedance, but that screws up the fuzz tone. It's like part of the reason why you want fuzzes close to the guitar is so that it gets that interactivity. It needs a high impedance signal, passive pickups, stuff like that. And so when you put a buffer in it, it's like putting any sort of buffer before your fuzz. It screws it up. So putting it after will give you the full sweep of the wah and give you the sound of the fuzz. But fuzz or wah sound different when they're being saturated like that, from a fuzz or an overdrive or something like that. So that's just what I think. We had actually a conversation with Zapata about this last week, which might be a cool live stream for you to check out. He kind of talks about his way of kind of thinking about it. Kyle, Merry Christmas. Thank you, sir. Same to you. How is the stereo buffer coming along? Stereo buffer. Let's see.
Zara. What's up, dude?
Matt Zara. Matt, come and join us over at the on YouTube, because it'll be more interactive and you'll be able to really hear this stuff.
It's in my bio.
All right. So how is the stereo buffer coming along? We were actually just talking about this when you got here. So all the buffers are actually already designed that we have, because the buffer that I would use is already actually in our boost, and there's 2 buffers in there. The idea is how do we get the price point around $100 so it's really affordable to everybody. So anybody could buy this thing. They'd have all their signal conditioning taken care of transparently within the spec that is really going to not color the tone, and then people can try out other things to color the tone. If they like kind of a rolled off thing, they could use a coily cable going in to get all the capacitance, or they could use something darker if they want to experiment with different shades. But that will be something that I plan to release in 2020. Let's take one more question, and let's do some more playing. Your take on pedal chain order, KLON, Tube Screamer, and Blues Driver. Well, I mean, I think John Mayer has kind of pioneered that combination, and I'm pretty sure that his order was Tube Screamer, it was Blues Driver, Tube Screamer, KLON. I think that was it. I think it was Blues Driver, Tube Screamer, KLON. Gabby Bergman can answer that question. If you're still here, Gabby, chime in on this one. I'm pretty sure that's the magic order. But again, this is all irrelevant unless you're combining them. If you're not combining them, it doesn't really matter what order they're in so much. I mean, other than I guess these all actually are buffers. So that could affect it some, because the buffers are going to, and all these pedals are not great. But if you had them in like a looper or something like that, then that wouldn't really matter too much. Let's do some playing. Let's shred. How about playing some John Mayer type stuff? Since we got a question about the John Mayer magic tone, can you play like some Sean Mayer, his brother?
Is that his brother's name?
Oh, I don't know.
Sean Mayer?
Maybe.
Yeah, what song do you think? What's up, John Mayer? We could play,
or you could just play Spanish Joy or whatever.
Yeah. What's like a Mary thing? Oh, yeah. I play this one. Yeah.
Woo!
Hey, check this out. This looper is pretty cool.
I'll bring it back in reverse.
It's got a reverse button.
And then octave down.
And then you can go up. Sounds like some Prince. That's dope.
All right. So I think that was sort of something like Olivia. Let's go back a few. Let's see. This is Aaron. If I connect my quilter amp to the effects loop of an HX Stomp, can I run stereo effects? No. So it does. You won't be able to run it in stereo unless you have two different amplifier sources. So it won't be true stereo at that point. You'll just have your
What's up, Grace?
effects in the effects loop that are doing your processing sounds, presumably. Eddie, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Lynette, could you run low impedance effects with inputs in series, multiple outputs? Could you run low impedance effects with inputs in series? Where are you asking where you would run them? Can you clarify that question, Lynette? What are some of the industry trends that you are most excited about with pedals? What would you like to see more of? I would like to see more parallel functionality, as in a built-in empty loops. Well, most of the switchers now have the ability to run any loop in parallel, so that kind of is a cool thing if you're into using loops. Like switchable MIDI switchers, most of them have the ability to run stuff in parallel. Like the Boss one, for example, is a really low price point one that you can run any of the loops in series or parallel. So that's kind of a cool thing. But I think that there's also, with the parallel thing, is sometimes there's not really an application. People just like want to say that they have like a parallel overdrive or something like that. It doesn't necessarily give you a better sound or a cooler sound or something that's more unusual. So I don't know. I mean, it can be cool for certain things, but I don't know that it's necessarily like a groundbreaking technology. I mean, people have been running parallel delays and reverbs, for 50 years, maybe 40 years, but definitely was a deal. So I don't know. Sometimes we reinvent pre-existing technology like it's something new. But I think the cool thing that's happening now, just to kind of get back to your question about like cool trends, I think it's the mixing of digital modeling, and I think that's getting really better and better. And I think Line 6 is doing a really good job of like with the HX effects. I really want to build a board using an HX effects that kind of mirrors my analog board, and then I just replace kind of my analog processing effects like modulation, delay, reverbs using all the HX, and then kind of using my staple overdrive stuff. I think that'd be a really cool thing. What about you? Any trends, Tim, that you are finding or you're liking in the pedal/music industry?
It was pretty broad.
Yeah. Any trends?
Trends with pedals.
Yeah.
I just like how it's easy nowadays to get a really good sound. Pedals are just getting better and better, and they're getting smaller. Yeah. Which is cool. So you could even just have like a little mini board and get a real huge sound out of it with these mini pedals that are awesome. For sure. You could just have a couple Vertex pedals and like a delay and just be good, and have a lot of sounds. And just a reminder to our Instagram folks, come over to YouTube where we're still streaming this live in high definition audio, all that stuff. So come over to YouTube, Vertex Effects, if you want to continue the conversation, because we're about to wrap up there. It looks like in about 8 seconds. And that's on Instagram. So come join us over on YouTube. I believe John Mayer also uses an Echo Park boost. I haven't seen that on his rig at any of the rehearsals or any of the stuff I've seen posted on stuff. But that doesn't mean it's not impossible. I know that there's some stuff that's kind of always a revolving door on that rig. So, I've messed with that Echo Park boost, though, because I know that Rhett had one. So I've seen it before, but I can't confirm or deny about the John Mayer thing. 3 tube screamers and wah, 1 input, parallel or series, 4 outs. Wouldn't that match the impedance? Lynette, for whatever reason, I think just because of the way that the conversations come in dispersed, I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about. So you're talking about having all these input tube screamers coming in as inputs and then running them into some sort of mixer. Well, if you were going to match impedances, you would need all of you were trying to match the impedance of what your guitar would normally see. You would still need some sort of buffer before it would split out to all those different effects, because you would need to control the 1 meg ohm input. And I don't remember what tube screamers are, like 490, 470, something like that on the input. I don't remember that. They're definitely not 1 meg. Because there's so few people that build drive pedals with a 1 meg input impedance. Hey, what about Zach?
Where's Zach?
Pedal for worship.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Oh yeah. In your opinion, what's the most versatile drive pedal for worship? I don't know. What do you think? As you play in church, Tim?
I'd say the steel string I use all the time. Right now, I use the Nile and the Tone Secret. I'd say they are all really great for church stuff. Like, they all sit in the mix really well, and you can even with the Tone Secret, you can actually get like a really big lead tone, and it's warm and crunchy for a lot of the like I played this here. Those kind of like intro sounding things. That's just the Tone Secret and the Nile, and that if you put you can kind of get there, and then if you add some Strymon stuff with it, it's just, I feel like that's the sound. But yeah, that's the Tone Secret, like almost all the way up on the gain. And then the Nile is really great because it's subtle, but it it's a compressor, so it brings up, it squashes everything, but it's very, very transparent sounding. that's what I've been using. The steel string is also amazing. And then
I second that. Yeah, this on my board for like worship stuff, definitely the steel string is like a must-have.
yeah,
Pretty much always on, and because it pairs so well with so many other drag pedals.
Yeah, steel string will work with almost anything. I've hardly found anything that it doesn't improve the sound of when combined with it.
yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, lately I've been using it with like the RC booster, the version 2.
Okay, with the 2 foot switches on it? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And that's really nice for just like rhythm, like kind of CCM rhythm stuff.
Yeah, I could see that. I can see that for sure. I hope that helps you, Zach. So I think no, I don't speak any German. Anybody speaking German?
9.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? No.
V Gates, Simon.
What's your preferred combination for ultraphonics, tube screamer, and reverb pedal?
I wouldn't use. Oh.
I don't know that I'd use ultraphonics and a tube screamer together because their
both
mid-range
really
is kind of
mid-rangey.
But I would say that the ultraphonics is a little bit more refined and smoother.
Yeah.
But I think that in terms of where they would sit relative to other instruments, it's very similar. Zeke is joining us. Hey, Zeke. Hey, buddy.
Oh, hello.
Hey, buddy. Let's move to... Okay, Can you show us the rig? Well, I don't know if we can pick it up. Can you pick it up without pulling anything out? Maybe. He wants
yeah, I can pick it up.
Yeah,
Pick it up.
That's it. Look at it. Hey, buddy.
So, I built this. But Mason has taught me a lot about building boards, so it's kind of the only reason. But I got this this lift from
Fixed PEDALBOARDS.
Fixed PEDALBOARDS, and then this is my solo board. So it's got a looper and it's got the octave like you've seen, and then the tone secret and the Nile. The favorite switch for the Flint, and then I have the underneath here. I have the Quilter 50-watt small tone.
Oh, the
block
tone
thing.
block, yeah.
And then I can run it, like if I have a solo gig, I can just bring a PA speaker and I can just plug all these pedals into this board, this mixer, and then I can plug a mic into it, and then I output just to a PA speaker, and that's like the perfect like solo rig. It's really compact. And I can also run it into an amp without the mixer, just into an amp, and it sounds great. Like if I'm going to a church gig, I'll use these two a lot in this. So yeah.
Cool. So that's the rig.
This is the rig.
That's the rig. And the looper, Gabby, is that what's the name of it? The 22500, the EHX one.
It's great. I just don't know how to delete loops yet. It's kind of complicated. I need to read the manual. It's not as intuitive as like a Boss looper, but it's really, really powerful. You can do a lot with it.
Hello from our friend Domi in France. Okay. When will you do a Dumbulator? I don't know. Dumbulator, because they would require that people would. I guess you'd want it for an effects loop. It would be pretty easy to do a solid state Dumbulator. I just don't know whether people would be into that for an effects loop. So basically, you would plug your effects loop into it, and it would be like a.
What's the difference? Is it just because it's tube?
Well, not all of them were tube. I don't think. I think some were solid state. But I think that remember your input cable is out. But I also think that he was using the Dumbles are all passive loops for the most part, and so you needed the Dumbulator. Otherwise, it put so much, it loaded down the signal so much it sounded terrible. Like even if you just connected a cable in the effects loop, it sounded pretty bad. So you needed one. But something I've considered, Domi, I think it's just like how many people would benefit from it. I don't know. Let's see. Anything for Portugal?
Sup, Portugal?
We have some dealerships in Spain and in Europe, but I don't think we have anybody in Portugal. All right, serious question. I have a power supply that delivers 120 milliamps and a pedal with 124 milliamps. Well, have you measured the pedal to make sure that it actually draws that? Because a lot of times the pedals will be rated at something, but when you measure them, it's way less. So getting something like the current reader from True Tone will really help you determine how much it actually draws. And if it's that close, I would be surprised if it drew exactly what it said. Usually there's a little cushion, so like we'll exaggerate sometimes our current draw by a few milliamps just in case somebody is bringing it right to the brink. You gotta go outside, buddy? You mind letting him out? Wait.
Yeah, no worries.
I think he's got to go pee. And it wouldn't damage the pedal, because there was a follow-up question. It won't damage the pedal. The pedal may not act properly, or if it's underpowered or starved, it might lose some of its fidelity. It might distort in a way that's not natural. But it wouldn't hurt the pedal. But no, it won't damage the pedal. Gabby, we just showed the pedal board. I know that you asked us a little while ago. We got some kind of cool fuzzy tones out of that. I guess you kind of had it cranked. It was kind of higher gain there, though, too. I had to actually bring down the amp a little bit because it was showing us something that was clipping on the meter here. Simon says, I only have one buffer in a rig with about 10 pedals. Should I use it as an input or an output buffer? Well, I mean, ideally you want to have both. You want to have one on the input and one on the output. But if you had to choose one, it sort of depends. If you usually have something on all the time early in the signal path, then it's not really going to, the input buffer is going to have less of an impact. And the output buffer will typically need to have a good quality buffer there, because that's going to be the longest individual cable line that's going to be going back to your amplifier, probably at least 10 feet for most people, whereas no interconnected patch cable is really going to equal 10 feet in any one run before a pedal is turned on. So it really depends. If you have some sort of always on pedal like a boost or a compressor that's kind of early on in the chain, the input buffer will be negligible. And the thing that you'll really be missing is just the correction of the... let me let it back. Come on, buddy. Come on. All right.
Zeke's back.
He's back. He's got his hedgehog. And the thing you'll be missing is just the corrective, kind of the input impedance that you would normally see if you plugged right into an amp. So you won't get that 1 meg on the input typically, unless your always on pedal has a 1 meg input impedance, but that would be very unusual that it would. This is Paul St. Ed's. Greetings, Uncle Mason. Front end amp is compression into drive into EQ, then using effects loop to the amp for delays and reverbs. Where do you place the buffers? Thanks from Akron, Ohio. Okay, so you're going to need, in the best case, if you want to really condition your line perfectly, you're going to need 3 buffers. So you need one on the input, the guitar plugs into first. Then it's going to go into compression, drive, EQ. Then it's going to hit an output buffer that's going to take it back to the input of the amp. Then you're going to send out of your effects loop. You're going to go into your delay and your reverb, and then you're going to put another buffer on the return, going back to the effects loop. So that'd be the best case scenario. If you can't afford 3 buffers, then I would just say focus on the front of the amp. So input buffer, output buffer, going back to the amp, and then just rely on the effects loop buffering to kind of do that for you. Yeah. Let's see, Dominique. The TS for a boost in the Ultraphonics, but with too much drive, it will be near a real dumble. So boost and Ultraphonics. That is a good combination. And Domi knows because he has a real dumble. Yeah, I'm sure that Tim will appreciate that. It is a cool rig. He does a lot of stuff. It's really versatile for him. I prefer the Quilter to the Iridium on the Quilter versus Iridium thing. I just think that Quilter they're really more amp guys, you know, and their background and getting amps that really represent the tones that they're going for, getting vintage Marshalls. I'm trying to hook them up with a Dumble that I have at our shop so that they can get access to a Dumble. They're doing it completely analog, you know, and I think that really goes a long way. There's something about the Iridium to me, not that it was bad, but it just sounded kind of small. If you're listening to it in ears, that might be less negligible, but there's like a thing about the way that it moves air that to me just didn't sound like a really beautiful, you know, tube amp or a 412 cabinet or that sort of thing. Let's see. By the way, I have a steel string. All right, very cool. Thank you, sir. Or miss, I don't know. I'm assuming you're a guy. It's like 99% guys that are watching this. You're very welcome for the answer. If your compressor is always on, then the input buffer, I mean, I would put it there if you had a choice. But, you know, a lot of the dual buffers I'm recommending, they're kind of self-contained where the input and output is in one. So you wouldn't want to just, you wouldn't want to run the input into the input of the amp and then the output in the effects loop, because splitting it that way it can create a ground loop if you have too many ground planes going on. So I would just be careful about that. Nathan Lewis, a winner has been chosen. We're going to be announcing that this week. So that is closed, and we're going to be announcing a winner of the EVH pedal board. Do you know Harley Benton pedals, and what's your opinion about them? I've just heard about them. I don't know about them or what they do or where they're made or anything about that. So I can't speak to those. But we've done about an hour and 15 here. Tim's starting to lose some steam. He's on his second LaCroix.
It's getting crazy over here.
Why don't you play us out, Tim, and we'll call it.
Play something good.
How about like a little Kenny Loggins? Little Kenny Loggins for our friends here on YouTube.
Oh shit! So nervous. Drop my pick.
Some BB Ray.
Highway to the danger zone. What was I gonna play?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you haven't done it already, please make sure that you subscribe. You check out Tim's Instagram channel, and that's what, at timmar.co. So it's TIMMAR.co.
Tim Marco.
So check him out on Instagram. If you haven't subscribed to us, please make sure that you do that and hit the bell icon. That just makes sure that you get all the latest and greatest information from us. Thank you so much, and happy holidays to all. And Merry Christmas to everybody. Dominique, just last question here. What pedal looper do you think, well, the Ditto is true bypass. I don't know if this one you have here is true bypass.
Which one?
The Electro-Harmonics one?
I doubt it.
He doesn't think so. I don't know. With the governor and the fuzz face and a wah before my rig, it would be cool. Yeah. So, yeah, the Ditto one I know is true bypass. So the TC Electronics Ditto one I know is true bypass. That won't mess with the tone of any of those. So there it is. Thank you all. Adios.
See ya.